All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rahakwadash. Want to send double honor to the elders, apostles, and the bishops at Great Millstone. Rule well. Peace, love, and salutations to the whole elect Akim out there doing this work in sincerity and in truth. All right, much love to the scattered elect out there. You know, you Israelites that may look like these heathen nations, but are by the seed of your father, of the chosen nation, which are the so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, and so-called Native Americans. All right, we're the brothers here in Great Millstone, Nebraska. I'm the brother you call Amath.
Brother Yatazakba.
And Kawashab.
Khan, and we want to get into, you had this situation where Trump is pretty much throwing a temper tantrum, concerning this war with Iran, right? And it's all over the headlines, how these NATO nations, all right, they're not indulging in the war with Trump. And Trump is screaming out, well, we're going to pull out of NATO. We don't, pretty much you guys haven't been there. So if you want to make a point, you can make a point, brother.
I just want to make a point real fast because, what Trump is doing, with his statements against NATO, like, they're ungrounded, for lack of better words. Like, it's not valid for a couple of reasons. Because one, NATO is a defense. They have a defense pact. I looked up a NATO defense pact, and it says it gives a breakdown on NATO. It says NATO is a military alliance of 32 North American and European nations established by the North Atlantic Treaty on April 4th, 1949. Its central feature is collective defense under Article 5, which states that an armed attack against one member is treated as an attack against all members. But Trump is on the offensive, and he's saying, why aren't y'all jumping in? When that's not the rules. If a country's being attacked, then he could be making that complaint. But you also have the other aspect of it where I actually lost my train of thought, so I guess it wasn't that important you mentioned.
I think, one thing that comes to mind, like you were saying, is they're supposed to jump in if America's being attacked. But America's the one who's
doing
just starting fights, for no reason.
Yeah, and it's going back to which all this. We're gonna get into. We're gonna get into an article, but America, with Iran has been starting shit. You know what I'm saying? Like even going with the Strait of Hormuz. How they pretty much started a conflict with Iran, and then they backed off, so called, and got mad at their alliances. I believe NATO as well, that wouldn't go over there and open up the strait for them. Like you're starting these conflicts, bro. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, hey, this is America's being a damn bully, right? Yeah. But this bully of the earth is going to get a rude awakening. But we want to get into, this article. Or unless brothers want to bring out a point or a precept before.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to bring out a quick precept, this is Sirach 8:15. It says, travel not by the way with a bold fellow, lest he become grievous unto thee, for he will do according to his own will, and thou shalt perish with him through his folly. And we often teach, not to hang out with people like this, because that can draw you into trouble. And it's like, what they're doing is not crazy. What they're doing is they just trying to preserve their own selves, because they know if they get involved with Iran, they're going to get fucked up. In America, the way they act, they can't really rely on America. So, they just looking out for their best, for their best interests,
Yeah.
Because America is that bold fellow. Habakkuk chapter 2 goes into how they keep not at home. Always starting wars in all over the world, getting in people's business.
Yep.
I would hate to have to be that person's defense,
Yeah. It's like you got you got a sibling that just goes around starting stuff with everybody, and then they start a conflict and they come and find you. Now you into a conflict and you mess around and get jumped. You know what I'm saying? It's like this is what America is doing, figuratively, But you want to make a point?
It could wait.
Kind of. So we can get into what was it, the one from PBS?
I go ahead and get into it. All right, this is an article from PBS.org titled "Trump complains NATO wasn't there when we needed them after talks with Root." This is from April 9th, 2026. It says President Donald Trump repeated his complaint about NATO after a closed-door meeting with the alliance's Secretary General Mark Rutte on Wednesday for discussions that had been expected to be aimed at soothing Trump's anger with the military alliance over the Iran war. Ahead of the private meeting, Trump has suggested the U.S. may consider leaving the transatlantic alliance after NATO member countries ignored his call to help as Iran effectively shut the Strait of Hormuz, a vital shipping waterway, and sent gas prices soaring.
Right, and this is why I made the statement that America or Trump himself is throwing a temper tantrum. Because we briefly got into with this North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You can't just pull out of that agreement.
Yeah.
Just because something's not going your way, right? And that's exactly what Trump is. Well, that's what he's conveying, right?
I got something for you.
Okay.
Back you up.
Okay.
I just looked it up. What law prevents the U.S. from leaving NATO? It says a federal law enacted in December 2023 prevents the U.S. president from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO under Section 1250A of the National Defense Authorization Act. Just backing you up.
Yeah, So it's and America believes they're above the law. Now if this ain't just words, which we know Trump, he's known for just shooting words out his ass, right? But let's say that he's dead ass serious. You can't do that. Federally you can't do it. You made a pact, and you have to keep that pact. Just the same way that you want these nations, these allied nations, to help you out in the war because of a pact. Well, you got to honor the entire thing. You can't just leave. So yeah, you know the water for that, brother.
Okay. It says, and by the way, just to mention, this article is from April, but it's relevant to right now because Trump is still making the same statements, still talking about he wants to leave NATO, So this article, is covering basically what's happening at, this month.
Well, yeah. And just real quick, and I'll let you get back to it, because there was the statement that he made of pulling out of NATO or wanting to leave NATO was, recent, and it correlates with the article that the brother's reading from April 9th. But there was a whole video where he was speaking on the NATO nations, how pretty much we don't need them. And this was a recent statement that Trump made. All right, so all this goes together. How America, they think that you can do what the hell they want to do. All right, yeah, you go ahead with that.
So it says, afterward, he issued an all-caps comment on social media suggesting he remained aggrieved. NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again, Trump said in his post.
Yep.
It says, the Republican president has had a warm relationship with Root in the past, and the meeting came after the U.S. and Iran late Tuesday agreed to a 2-week ceasefire that includes the reopening of the strait. The nascent ceasefire, or just beginning ceasefire, was struck after Trump said he would strike Iran's power plants and bridges, threatening that a whole civilization will die tonight.
Right, which, to my understanding, that's a war crime. All right,
Yeah.
to threaten the obliteration of an entire nation.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to be destroying bridges and things like that, because that's how them trucks get from place to place to deliver food to stores, and what I'm saying, that's how product travels. So to destroy a nation's bridges, like you said, that's a war crime. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It says earlier Wednesday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt acknowledged that Trump had discussed leaving NATO. I think it's something that the president will be discussing in a couple hours, but Secretary General Root Leavitt said. Congress in 2023 passed a law that prevents any U.S. president from pulling out of NATO without its approval.
Yep, well, there we go.
Yep.
Further confirmation.
Come.
You go ahead.
Trump has been a longtime critic of NATO, and in his first term has suggested he had the authority on his own to leave the alliance, which was founded in 1949 to counter the Cold War threat posed to the European security by the Soviet Union. The crux of the commitment its 32 member countries make is a mutual defense agreement in which an attack on one is considered an attack on them all.
An attack
Right.
on them, on any NATO member,
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, that don't mean NATO could just go start fights and like, oh yeah, I gotta back them up, you know?
Yeah. You like once you go attack somebody yourself, and you start a problem, and then they're fighting back, and you even if you start losing, that's your war that you chose to fight.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Now it's about to make a point here. It says the only time it has been activated was in 2001 to support the U.S. in the wake of the 9/11 attacks on New York and Washington. So that's when a country could jump in and help. You know what I'm saying? They would like being attacked unprovoked, even though we know 9/11 was an inside job. But
Right.
but you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, that proves they might be planning some other type of false flag thing to get them to join in.
That's a good point. Says despite that, Trump has complained during his war of choice with Iran that NATO has shown it will not be there for the U.S. on Wednesday. He also seemed to be angry about NATO's stance on Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory of NATO member Denmark. Trump had pressed for U.S. control over Greenland earlier this year before backing off after talks with Root. It says, remember Greenland, that big, poorly run piece of ice, Trump posted Wednesday.
That's wild, man.
It says, and then it's, let me see here. It says, there's a law barring a president from pulling out of NATO. It's unclear if the Trump administration would challenge the law barring a president from pulling out of NATO. When the law passed, it was championed by Trump's current Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who at the time was a senator from Florida. Rubio met separately with Root on Wednesday morning at the State Department ahead of the White House talks. In a statement, the State Department said Rubio and Root had discussed the war with Iran, along with U.S. efforts to negotiate an end to the Russia-Ukraine war and increasing coordination and burden shifting with NATO allies. But you see how Trump is talking to his allies, and he's just, he's being irreverent, disrespectful, and this is, just going toward, the prophecy where it says, all ye that bend the bow, shoot at her. This, when that time comes when America is destroyed, you're going to even have America allies shooting at America.
Yeah.
God, hey, I got a precept for you.
Come.
This is Revelation 17, verse 16. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire.
So them 10 horns, that's going into that those NATO and EU countries. I'll search it up real fast. Going into break down those 10 horns, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's totally fine, brother.
So because when the EU at this point, how many member states is it? 32.
32.
But when the EU originally started, there was only 12. Or when the NATO started, it was only 12. Salakia. And it says those 12 founding members were Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Now, even though there's 12, the prophecy consolidates them into 10, because you have Spain and Portugal, as well as the UK and Ireland count as one. Spain and Portugal were recognized as one landmass for hundreds and hundreds of years until recent time. Ireland is basically just a territory of the UK for the most part. It's its own country, but it received independence, as of recent years as well. So that's why, within the prophecy, it recognizes those two pairs as one, which will make it 10 founding members technically. And it says, in that Revelation, it says what the 10 horns is going to burn the whore. That whore is speaking about America, which rides upon the beast, spearheading this this alliance. We can tell that that whore riding upon the beast is America based off of the relations between NATO. Because when you get into it, it says that a lot of basically and this is something that Trump often says, that the U.S. is doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to NATO. They put in the most money. They have the strongest military, and you got countries that, depend on the U.S. and even though they don't like the U.S., or certain things that the president may do, they don't think they should pull away because the U.S. is helping a lot economically and things like that. But that's showing you that horror, is America.
Yeah. And I want to make a quick point, like, in the topic of how, they shall hate the whore. I remember there was an article a while ago where Denmark said that they're damn near willing to leave NATO because of Trump's behavior and, wanting to take Greenland.
Okay.
So it's mutual, America hating NATO, NATO and NATO hating America. European Union, they're not getting along. They're divided, like you said earlier.
Yep. Actually, I got that pulled up. This is the book of, excuse me. This is the book of Mark, chapter 3, verse 25. It says, "And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand." So that house being broken up, they can't agree on anything. Like you mentioned, that's a good point with Denmark. Be just based off of one of the major NATO nations being America wants to leave because he's not he pretty much going by his own rules. You're doing your own thing within something that y'all supposed to be doing together, right? No different from now. Now you want you're pissed off at the NATO members, to where they ain't our problem. We ain't start that shit. Why we not about to help you? That's a house being divided.
Yeah, you even got when Britain left the EU, a few years ago, Brexit, because there was different like EU policies that that the UK didn't agree with, which is why they ended up leaving. They had open border policies and they felt that was taking away their autonomy and their freedom, as well as different financial reasons, but that's showing you the instability within the alliance, And if I could get this Daniel. Unless you want to get into something else.
No, you can get to that.
Okay, come. This is Daniel chapter 2, and I'll just get straight to the point in verse 41, where it says, "And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay."
Right. So this is going into that dream that Nebuchadnezzar had of the statue. Right now, brother got straight to the point.
You want me to read up on it?
But no, you don't have to.
Okay.
Brother got straight to the point. But you have the head of gold, which was the ancient Babylon. Then you had the chest of silver and breast of silver. That was the Medo-Persians. And then you had what were the legs?
Legs of brass.
Legs of brass, and that was I believe that was Greece.
Or the the thighs of brass.
The thighs of brass. It was Greece.
Kind.
Right, and then you had
the legs of iron.
The legs of iron, which was Rome, and then it goes down to the feet, right, which is the clay.
The iron mixed with
the
clay.
iron mixed with clay.
Kind.
Right. So what is that talking about? That's talking about this current ruling age, or specifically America and the NATO nations.
Yeah.
Right.
Because to back you up, because like the brother said, them legs of iron was Rome. And we understand that America is the second coming of the Roman Empire. So when you get to them feet, the iron mixed with the clay is representing, how, they're partly strong, partly broken. And America is part of that strong aspect of that mixture. Them being characterized as the iron, because when you read here in verse 42, it says, "And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken." And you got 10 toes, just like you got the 10 horns upon that beast that's going into that NATO alliance.
Mm-hmm.
So it says, it's partly strong, partly broken. You got stronger aspects of the NATO alliance. You got weaker aspects. Some of the countries are stronger militarily, stronger economically. Yeah. Then you got other countries that don't really pitch in as much. They can't pitch in as much, Yeah.
I gotta, now you bring it up, I have a few examples, with like some of the stronger nations, right? And this is, just gonna kind of read through it, you know, this is from the chat, where you know, you have, like the brother mentioned, like the militarily, the stronger nations, of course, America. You have France, Germany, Italy, and Turkey. Okay, these are some of the stronger nations militarily. You know, not, but like you said, you know, not all of them are financially equipped. I believe, like Poland, I believe they weren't. I'm trying to. I got these tabs, so bear with me. Yeah, here we go. So some of the poorer ones, all right, of them is no, Poland wasn't one of them. Slovakia. You have Turkey, Romania, and Portugal. You know, these are like middle income NATO nations. So these are the you know, financially, you know, these are the ones that are not equipped now, are not strong.
Yeah, and is again, you know, with it being partly strong, partly broken, you know, you got members of NATO that don't appreciate that you have weaker aspects of it, such as America. You know, that's one of the reasons Trump said that he wants to leave, because he's like, some of these countries just getting free rides off of us pulling more weight. You know,
right.
NATO has a spending agreement where they're like, everybody has to pitch in 2% of their GDP. And you've had in the past where certain countries were barely able to meet that standard. You know, NATO has discussed that they want to, you know, by, I believe, like 2035, they said that they want to up their spending agreement up to 5% GDP. And some countries, like, ain't going to be able to meet that standard, you know, because they're not as well off. Like, America is an economic powerhouse in the earth. You know, France, an economic powerhouse. How is Portugal supposed to, you know, meet that standard? How is Spain supposed to meet that standard, you know? So that's showing you, you know, that partly strong, partly broken aspect. And then you have the aspect where iron and clay, you can mash it together, but it's never truly going to be formed together, if that makes sense. You know, I wanted to read this that kind of explains what I'm trying to say, where it says, because I asked Grok a question, you know, why do NATO member countries often have so many disagreements and conflicting interests? And this is just in the conclusion right here. It says, in short, NATO is not a unitary actor or a federation. It is a coalition of independent democracies that cooperate when their interests sufficiently overlap. The disagreements are the predictable price of that design. So these are, you know, a bunch of countries, you know, in different parts of the world with their own problems, their own interests, their own alliances. You know, they all have their own things going on, but they're coming together in agreement about certain things. We got to remember, these countries came together as a deterrent toward the Soviet Union.
Okay.
So they all have a big reason to stick together, which is being against Russia. But then you got all the internal stuff that, you know, once they, you know, past that, it's like they got all these disagreements. You know, America trying to take another member country's territory, you know. But, you know, they're just, you know, to get into that breakdown a little bit more.
No, it's good, because, hey, you know, it's really has become more unstable. You know, it has become, because they were strong, like you mentioned, there was a deterrent for Soviet Union, World War II. But, you know, since then, the armies have decreased.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you said, like that point, more and more conflict with in-house fighting, you know, or in-house, not physical conflicts, but in-house conflicts. Brothers get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, so that's essentially this thing is gonna break down, right? Like the brother brought the revelation. You know, that they shall hate the whore. What does Obadiah say? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border.
Yep.
You know, and they gonna, you know, so these nations, they're these allied nations to America within the NATO, eventually they're gonna turn on you, bro. Right? You're making threats to leave, right? Like, oh, well, we don't need you then. You know, that's what America says. We don't need you. All right. his was in Isaiah the 14th chapter, his pomp, you know, his staff is going to be broken. We don't have to get it, you know, just mention it, because that shows you the pride of America, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and you know, right now it seems like it's it would be, you know, absurd for these countries that's together to eventually start shooting missiles at each other. But once that time of World War III comes, we got to keep in mind, like, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. So the Lord is going to be putting the spirit in these different kings to have an evil eye toward America. They already do. Mm-hmm. It's just things are peaceful enough to where that escalation is unnecessary. You know, but once World War III happens and countries are going through it, and people have already been, you know, going through a certain level of being war torn. You know, we don't know what America is going to do in the future that's going to make these NATO countries hate them even more.
Right.
That point is going to come where that Revelation 17 going to come to pass, where these, you know, NATO and EU is going to turn against America. All ye that bend the bow shoot at her, spare no arrows. That's the Lord's determination.
That's right.
You know.
Right. Yeah. And just for the record, you know, just to add on to that, you mentioned what Iran. Well, they're close allies with two strongly militarized countries, being Russia and China. So you got to deal with them as well as your own allies. So like, just backing you up on that, all ye that bend the bow, you know, because terror's gonna come upon America on all sides, man. Okay.
That's all I had.
So you have any thing you want to add, brother?
Yeah, just going into that Strait of Hormuz, like, you know, basically them being a part of NATO, these European countries, you know, Iran is not working with them either. So America is basically causing them to be antagonized by all these other nations.
Kinda.
And it's like eventually they're gonna be like, damn, well let's just get away from these people, you know. Because America is that big bully, and it just doesn't stop, and it doesn't know how to stop until it gets destroyed. That's what the Lord's gonna do. He's gonna. There's no other way.
That's right.
They can't learn. You know, Trump ain't gonna learn. These powers that be here in America. But again, like the brother said, that's ultimately the Lord's will. So the Lord is moving the chess pieces in that direction.
That's right. Okay, so with that being said, we pray that this was edifying, man. With that being said, we can give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Chakwadash. Once again, double honor to the elders, apostles, and bishops at Great Millstone. Peace, love, and salutations is to the elect. Shalom.
Shalom.